Hey guys, Steinixos here. So today, in my Power Scaling Fundamentals series, we're going to be talking about the durability problem. Now, in my creation problem video, I broke down why you can't just convert certain non-combat feats, like hacks feats or creation feats, into attack potency or durability. But if you go back and watch that video, you'll notice I really emphasize the attack potency side of things. And that's because, let's be honest, that's the part most people tend to struggle with. Now, the reason I didn't focus too much on the durability aspect, aside from the fact that it's kind of implied, is because even without that video, most people already get that trying to convert certain non-combat feats into durability just doesn't make any sense. You see, it's more intuitive. And to be fair, authors usually do a better job showing where durability stands in relation to a character's abilities. Take hacks for example. I don't need to appeal to your deep sense of logic or your common sense just to convince you that, say, Baragon using aging abilities doesn't automatically mean he's immune to all forms of instant death attacks. Why? Because the story itself shows you that he's not. He's actually even susceptible to his own aging ability. It's right there, plainly demonstrated. And even with more abstract or complex feats, like creation feats, it is usually still pretty easy to grasp. Like take Kaguya, who created multiple dimensions. For most honest viewers, you don't need some overly complicated 30-minute breakdown to understand that scaling her durability to the creation of her dimensions is kind of silly, because you literally see for yourself that she couldn't even withstand the gravity in one of her own dimensions. So yeah, for most people, this part of durability scaling already clicks. But again, the underlying principles behind this is broken down fully in that creation problem video, so if you want a deeper dive, go check that out. Now, in this video, what I really want to do is dig into some other more specific types of misunderstandings, these subtle fallacies and mistaken assumptions around durability-based scaling that aren't as obvious. They're a bit more nuanced, a bit trickier to spot, but they're just as important to address. Now, one of the major durability-related scaling issues I've noticed, and one I like to call the one-hit problem, is this. Whenever a character manages to damage another character, people just automatically assume that the attacker's attack potency must now be equal to the highest possible level of the durability of the character they hurt. And honestly, there's almost no interaction that exemplifies this better than the constant discourse surrounding that one panel where Sakura manages to land a punch on and hurt Kaguya. You see, the kind of argument you'll typically hear from a large portion of Naruto scalers goes something like this. Kaguya has solar system level durability because she created dimensions. So, since Sakura damaged her, Sakura obviously has solar system level attack potency. Now, we've already broken down why the idea that Kaguya is solar system level just because she created some dimensions is flawed. I explained that at the start of this video and in much more detail in my creation problem video. So for now, let's just put that aside and let's actually assume, for the sake of this video, that Kaguya is actually solar system level in durability based on that scaling. Even if that were true, the real problem with the Sakura scaling argument is this. It completely ignores, or just outright disregards, the fact that most characters have tiers to their durability, meaning there's usually a range, a minimum effective durability, which is the lowest amount of attack power required to do damage, and a maximum effective durability, which is the highest level of force they're still able to withstand. So just because you managed to damage someone doesn't automatically mean your attack was on par with the maximum end of their durability. That's a huge leap in logic, and it's one that doesn't hold up when you really think about how this kind of scaling works. Like seriously, I just want to impress this on you. Everyone already understands this principle, even if they don't say it out loud. Take Garp for example. Even as an older man, Garp is shown to withstand attacks from top tier characters like Aokiji and Admiral. But back in the early parts of the series, Axe-Hand Morgan, a complete nobody by comparison, managed to injure him. Now ask yourself, would any serious person try to scale Axe-Hand Morgan up to Admiral level just because of that? Of course not. Or let's look at someone like Goku, who, even way back in early Dragon Ball, had durability levels far exceeding planetary scale. And yet, in Dragon Ball Super, he's shown getting hurt by a regular bullet. Are we supposed to scale that bullet up to solar system level now? Obviously not. That would be ridiculous. And anyone being honest with themselves knows that. everyone intuitively understands that durability isn't a flat, one-size-fits-all value. It has a range. And beyond that, there are tons of contextual factors that influence how damage happens, like whether the character was caught off guard, whether they were even trying to defend themselves, or if plot-induced stupidity or outliers were in play. So the takeaway here is this. When it comes to scaling, you can't just take one hit and jump to the top of the tier list. You have to consider the full context, not just the result. Now, from the examples I've given, it should be pretty clear that there's usually a big gap between a character's minimum and maximum effective durability. And this isn't just something that comes into play when a character is off guard. You see, that's actually why I use the term effective durability in the first place, to signal that we're talking about durability when the character is prepared, not just when they're caught slipping. Like, take Kaido for example. When the scabbards were fighting him, they could really only manage to do superficial damage, even when they combined their attacks. At best, all they did was just partially reopen an old scar. But then we see Zoro land a much more powerful attack, one that Kaido himself acknowledges, saying Zoro's Conqueror's infused strike will leave a scar. And even then, even that wasn't anywhere near the upper limits of Kaido's durability, because later on, we see him take far stronger hits from Gear 5th Luffy. In fact, just to put some actual numbers behind this and show you how wide the gap really is, based on my own calculations from the How Strong is Gear 5 Luffy video, Luffy's base attack potency in the Kaido fight jumped from 81 petatons, that's multi-continental, to over 1.07 yotatons, which is planet level, and that's without even factoring in Gear 5. So again, let's bring it back to our original example with Kaguya and Sakura. Even if we granted the premise, even if Kaguya really was solar system level in terms of her maximum durability, and even if Sakura's punch wasn't the result of plot-induced factors or battle-related variables like Kaguya being caught off guard, even then, the concept of minimum versus maximum effective durability would still explain why this one punch doesn't automatically scale Sakura to the top tier of Kaguya's durability. Because just like it would be silly to try and scale the Scabbard's attack potency to Kaido's maximum durability level just because they managed to hurt him a little, it's just as silly to try and scale Sakura all the way up to Kaguya's highest durability level just because she managed to damage her once. But you see, this understanding of minimum and maximum effective durability now introduces a new problem, and that is, how do you actually determine whether a durability related feat between two characters is an upscale for one character or a downscale for the other? Like with our Sakura and Kaguya example, is it that Sakura is just way stronger than people originally thought? Or is it that Kaguya's minimum effective durability is actually a lot lower than most people assume? Now obviously, separate from battle-related factors like whether a character was caught off guard and plot-related things like plot-induced stupidity or outlier moments, all of which by the way are already covered under the idea of effective durability. Aside from that, there are still several different ways to approach this. The first method is to properly classify the type of character you're dealing with. Specifically, does this character fall into what I like to call the impenetrable wall archetype? Because in most battle-focused stories, there's usually at least one character whose entire thing, or at least one of their major selling points, is their seemingly unbreakable toughness. Kaido is a perfect example of this archetype. I mean, his whole introduction is just a series of failed execution attempts, whether it's by blades, arrows, or even himself jumping off a sky island from 10,000 meters up, and none of it does a thing to him, doesn't even break his skin, much less do any damage. So from the start, Kaido is established as a character who isn't going to be damaged on accident. He even says it himself, you have to be at a certain level if you want to hurt him. So, if someone does manage to hurt Kaido, and it's not under some very specific or unusual conditions, then by definition, that means the attacker must be at that certain level. It cannot be the case that Kaido's minimum effective durability is just randomly low. That would directly contradict the way his character is built and presented. So when you look at the example of the Scabbards fighting Kaido, they were actually able to do damage to Kaido, superficial damage, but damage nonetheless. And remember, this is something that even a post-Whole Cake Island Luffy couldn't do. So despite most people thinking that the scabbards are weak and wanting to call this feat into question, we can be confident that this wasn't a fluke or a downscale for Kaido, but rather it was a legitimate upscale for the scabbards. And that conclusion comes directly from Kaido being a textbook example of the impenetrable wall archetype. Other examples of characters in this same mold would be the third Raikage from Naruto, whose defenses were so strong that only his own attacks could pierce him, as well as the absolute battle maniac Kenpachi from Bleach and one of my favorite characters in existence, Caliban from Tower of God. But here's the thing, if a character doesn't fall into the impenetrable wall archetype, and honestly, most characters don't, then figuring out whether something is an upscale or a downscale becomes trickier. So how do you work it out? Well, one of the best ways to approach it is to look at whether the character was previously unable to damage someone and then later is able to do it, especially if the story or the context clearly indicates that some kind of growth in strength occurred between those two moments. Take Luffy versus Bluno as a perfect example. At first, Luffy couldn't even touch Bluno. It was a clear point in the fight. But after some inner reflection and growth, he comes back and suddenly he can hurt Bluno even while still in base form. And Bluno himself points out that Luffy's gotten stronger. So everything about that scene, the context, the dialogue, the framing, all points to this being an upscale for Luffy, not a downscale for Bluno's durability. Now obviously, not every case is this clear. Some are murkier, but usually if you're just being honest with yourself and actually paying attention to the context, you can figure it out. And of course, let's circle all the way back to Sakura hurting Kaguya. Most people already agree that this was just a plot beat, a thematic moment to show Team 7 all working together. And again, even if it wasn't, and even if we assume that Kaguya does have solar system level durability as one of her tiers, there's still no reason to assume that this is her minimum effective durability. Thus, trying to scale Sakura's punch to that level is just as silly as when someone says, well, Kaguya's truth-seeking orb was going to destroy a solar system-sized dimension eventually. So that means all of her other attacks, like the 80 Gods Vacuum Fist, must scale to that same level. Like, come on now. Even ignoring the fact that the truth-seeking orb is a hack's ability with its own special mechanics, everyone understands that trying to scale every single attack to a character's strongest move, especially when that strongest move takes an unspecified amount of time to even work, is either just bad scaling at best or outright dishonesty at worst. Now, there are a few other minor points I want to bring up, just in passing, that still matter when talking about durability scaling. First off, a lot of people tend to ignore the fact that some parts of the body are just naturally weaker than others, like the eyes for example. So when Boruto was able to blind Sasuke in one eye with a kunai, that doesn't suddenly mean we can scale Boruto to Sasuke's level. That's just silly. You see, certain parts of the body, no matter how powerful a character is overall, are more vulnerable. And unless there's evidence that a character was actively reinforcing that area, you can't take those moments and start throwing around top-tier scaling claims. Now, to be fair, some power systems do allow for protection of even those more vulnerable spots. Take Bleach for instance. With the technique Blood Vein, we specifically saw Byakuya's blade strike as Not's eye, and it didn't even leave a scratch. Why? Because the eye was being reinforced by Blood Vein. That kind of defensive ability is explicitly shown, and it's a key detail that changes how you interpret the feat. Similarly, when you're dealing with regeneration type characters, there's a really common trap people fall into. A lot of authors purposely allow those characters to be damaged more easily, just to show off their regeneration. It's part of the spectacle, so you've got to be cautious when trying to scale from those damage moments. The true test of a regenerator's durability usually comes from one of two scenarios. Either when they can't regenerate, like the second half of Dante vs. Magna in Black Clover, or when an attack is able to bypass their regeneration entirely, like when Asta one-shots Dante with a powerful anti-magic slash. Mental durability, meaning how well a person can keep fighting through pain and damage, also plays a big role in these cases, and that's especially true when dealing with characters who regenerate. I go deeper into that whole topic in my video, The Regeneration Problem, so if you're interested, check that one out. Now of course, course, we also have to talk about durability negation, because that's another major factor that people overlook. These are attacks that bypass conventional defenses altogether and deal damage regardless of a character's normal durability, and these are a little more complicated to deal with. One common mechanism of durability negation involves bypassing external durability, so things like your skin, muscle, bones, armor, or energy defenses, to directly target your internal durability, meaning your organs. And I actually go into detail on that mechanism in my video, The Internal Destruction Problem, so if you're curious about how that works, go give that one a watch. And of course, if you guys are interested, I could do a dedicated video just on durability negation, where I catalog the different types and mechanisms we see across different series. So let me know in the comments if that's something you'd want to see. But even without that deep dive, it should be pretty obvious that not all durability negating attacks operate on the same level. Like, come on, being able to phase through a body and remove an organ directly, like what the Flash can do, is clearly on a whole different tier compared to something like hitting an organ directly with hacky internal destruction techniques, as we see with One Piece characters. And that is also obviously on a whole different level from techniques like the Gentle Fist from Naruto, which does indirect internal damage by first damaging the chakra network, and then, as a downstream effect of this, causes organ damage. So yeah, trying to treat all these techniques as if they're all on the same level, that's just bad scaling. Different characters have different abilities, with different mechanisms, and they need to be assessed accordingly. Now the last point I want to briefly go over is the direct scaling of durability from attack potency. You see, obviously, anyone with a bit of common sense can understand that if a character is using a weapon, like a sword, a gun, or any other indirect thing like an energy blast, then, barring super special exceptions, you usually can't directly scale their durability from their attack potency. I mean, just think about it. You can fire a gun and deal massive damage, but that doesn't suddenly mean your body can tank a bullet. So that part is usually pretty straightforward, and most people don't have trouble wrapping their heads around it. So, the idea of scaling durability from attack potency usually tend to come up when a character is using their own body to attack. Things like punches and kicks. And the general logic is, if you're punching someone with a certain level of force, then you'd at least need to be able to withstand the recoil or feedback from your own punch. That makes sense, right? Newton's third law at work. This becomes even more apparent during direct physical clashes, like when two characters' punches are clashing. In that case, not only are they withstanding the recoil of their own attack, but they are also physically enduring the opposing character's force as well. Now, I'm not bringing this up to say the logic is inherently flawed. In fact, if you are being careful, this kind of scaling is usually fine. Most people will scale properly here if they're paying attention. However, I'm bringing this up to highlight a pitfall, because not every physical attack a character performs should be assumed to directly scale to their durability. For example, take the third Raikage from Naruto. He's known for his incredible durability and his insane physical strength, but if you just blindly assumed that his durability matched his attack potency, you'd be wrong. We see where when his physical attacks are not directed at himself, he does absolutely fine. However, when his same physical attack is directed at himself, it literally pierced right through him. Again, that infamous scar on his chest, that came from him not being able to no-sell his own physical attack. So clearly, his attack potency actually exceeds his durability. So the point here is, be careful. Just because you're not seeing a character's body fall apart with every attack like early Deku does, that doesn't mean every single one of their physical strikes can be used to justify a one-to-one attack potency to durability scaling. But anyway, that's the video, guys. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section down below. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. But anyway, see you guys next time.